Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. We are streaming live the Capital 6 riot investigations, J6 committee, and I'll be giving my commentary as we go along. This is important. Everybody needs to know what's going on with our government. So I decided to stream it live. Welcome to What the Fuck News. I report on the stuff that makes you go, what the fuck? And this is one of those things. Happy streaming, and I hope you enjoy the show. I'll give you my commentary as soon as as I can. Thank you. Let's go. Let's get to it. They'll be announcing the committee members in a few minutes.
The Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during today's hearing. Good afternoon, and may God bless the United States of America. 4 months ago, this committee started to present our findings to you, the American people. From the beginning, we understood that some people watching those proceedings would wrongly assume that the committee's investigation was a partisan exercise. That's why I asked those who were skeptical of our work to simply listen to the evidence, to hear the testimony with an open mind, and to let the facts speak for themselves before reaching any judgment. Over the course of these hearings, the evidence has proven that there was a multi-part plan led by former President Donald Trump to overturn the 2020 election. Donald Trump lost his bid for re-election, as shown from the testimony of some of the president's closest allies and advisors. Donald Trump knew he lost. Despite this knowledge, Donald Trump went to court to contest the 2020 election, and he lost in court. The Electoral College met and declared Joe Biden the winner, yet Donald Trump continued to pull out all the stops in his attempt to stay in power. What Donald Trump proceeded to do after the 2020 election is something no president has done before in our country. In a staggering betrayal of his oath, Donald Trump attempted a plan that led to an attack on a pillar of our democracy. It's still hard to believe. But the facts and testimony are clear, consistent, and undisputed. How do we know this? How have we been able to present such a clear picture of what took place? Because of the testimony we've heard and that we have presented to you through these proceedings, because of the documentary evidence we've gathered, and also made available directly to you, the American people. When you look back at what has come out through this committee's work, the most striking fact is that all this evidence comes almost entirely from Republicans. The evidence that has emerged did not come from Democrats or opponents of Donald Trump. Instead, look at who's written and testified and produced evidence. Who has that been? Aides who've worked loyally for Donald Trump for years, Republican state officials and legislators, Republican electors, the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, political professionals who worked at the highest levels of the Trump campaign, Trump appointees who served in the most senior positions in the Justice Department, President Trump's staff and closest advisors in the White House, members of the President Trump's family, his own White House counsel. I've served in Congress a long time. I can tell you it's tough for any congressional investigation to obtain evidence like what we've received, least of all such a detailed view into a president's inner circle. And I want to be clear, not all these witnesses were thrilled to talk to us. Some put up quite a fight, but ultimately the vast majority cooperated with our investigation. And what we've shown you over the last 4 months has been centered on the evidence that has come overwhelmingly from Republican witnesses. So I say to you again, as I did in June, this investigation is not about politics. It's not about party. It's about the facts, plain and simple. And it's about making sure our government functions under the rule of law as our Constitution demands. Today, as in previous proceedings, my colleagues and I will present new evidence. That includes new testimony from additional Republicans who served in the Trump administration, never before seen footage of congressional leaders on January 6th working to coordinate the response to the violence and ensure the people's business went forward. New materials produced to the committee by the Secret Service, details about the ongoing threat to American democracy. Today's proceeding will also be grounded in the facts, but it won't look exactly like all our other hearings. We'll also take a step back and look at the evidence in a broader context, providing a summary of key facts we've uncovered. Facts relevant to former President Trump's state of mind, about his motivation, and about his intent. What did President Trump know? What was he told? What was his personal and substantial role in the multi-part plan to overturn the election? For those of you who watched our prior hearings, some of this evidence will look familiar. For those of you tuning in for the first time, we'll summarize some of the most important facts, and we'll urge you to go online and watch our hearing in full. There's one more difference about today. Pursuant to the notice circulated prior to today's proceedings, we are convened today not as a hearing, but as a formal committee business meeting, so that in addition to presenting evidence, we can potentially hold a committee vote on further investigative action based upon that evidence. Before we get to that evidence, I'd recognize our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any opening statement she'd care to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Much has happened since our last public hearing on July 21st. As the chairman mentioned, we've received new and voluminous documentation from the Secret Service, which we continue to analyze. We've received new witness testimony, including about efforts to obstruct our investigation and conceal key facts. And according to public reporting, the Department of Justice has been very active in pursuing many of the issues identified in our prior hearings. Our committee may ultimately decide to make a series of criminal referrals to the Department of Justice, but we recognize that our role is not to make decisions regarding prosecution. The preamble to our Constitution recites among its purposes to, quote, establish justice. and our nation's judiciary and our U.S. Department of Justice have that responsibility. A key element of this committee's responsibility is to propose reforms to prevent January 6th from ever happening again. We've already proposed, and the House has now passed, a bill to amend the Electoral Count Act to help ensure that no other future plots to overturn an election can succeed. And we will make further specific recommendations in our final report, based in part on the evidence you will hear today. Our hearings last summer began with an outline of President Trump's multi-part plan to overturn the 2020 presidential election. We then proceeded to demonstrate each of these elements in detail, with more than 20 hours of evidence. Today, we will see new evidence, but as the chairman said, we will also synthesize evidence you've seen before. The vast weight of evidence presented so far has shown us that the central cause of January 6th was one man, Donald Trump, whom many others followed. None of this would have happened without him. He was personally and substantially involved in all of it. Exactly how did one man cause all of this? Today, we will focus on President Trump's state of mind, his intent, his motivations, and how he spurred others to do his bidding, and how another January 6th could happen again if we do not take necessary action to prevent it. As you view our evidence today, I would suggest a focus on the following points. First, as you will see, President Trump had a premeditated plan to declare that the election was fraudulent and stolen before Election Day, before he knew the election results. He made his stolen election claims on election night against the advice of his campaign without any evidence in hand. Then, over the next 2 months, he sought to find those who would help him invent and spread lies about the widespread fraud. Many of those who stepped forward to help, including Rudy Giuliani, knew they never had real evidence sufficient to change the election results. And on the evening of January 5th, they admitted they were still trying to find that phantom evidence. Of course, as a result of making intentionally false claims of election fraud, Mr. Giuliani's license to practice law has now been suspended. Second, please recognize that President Donald Trump was in a unique position, better informed about the absence of widespread election fraud than almost any other American. President Trump's own campaign experts told him that there was no evidence to support his claims. His own Justice Department appointees investigated the election fraud claims and told him point blank they were false. In mid-December 2020, President Trump's senior advisors told him the time had come to concede the election. Donald Trump knew the courts had ruled against him. He had all of this information, but still he made the conscious choice to claim fraudulently that the election was stolen, to pressure state officials to change election results, to manufacture fake electoral slates, to attempt to corrupt our Department of Justice, to summon tens of thousands of supporters to Washington. Knowing that they were angry, knowing that some of them were armed, he sent them to the Capitol. Then, as the riot was underway, he incited his supporters to further violence by publicly condemning his vice president. And then he refused for hours to disband his rioting supporters and instruct them to leave the Capitol, even when he was begged repeatedly to do so. None of this is normal or acceptable or lawful in our republic. Third, please consider today who had a hand in defeating President Trump's efforts to overturn the election. Vice President Pence, Bill Barr, Jeff Rosen, and others at the Department of Justice. State Republican officials, White House staff who blocked proposals to mobilize the military to seize voting machines and run new elections. Our Capitol Police, aided by the Metropolitan Police, other federal law enforcement, and our National Guard, who arrived later in the afternoon. All of these people had a hand in stopping Donald Trump. This leads us to a key question. Why would Americans assume that our Constitution and our institutions in our republic are invulnerable to another attack? Why would we assume that
Right.
those institutions will not falter next time.
Exactly.
A key lesson of this investigation is this: our institutions only hold when men and women of good faith make them hold,
We could have lost
regardless
it
of
all.
the political cost. We have no guarantee that these men and women will be in place next time. Any future president inclined to attempt what Donald Trump did in 2020 has now learned not to install people who could stand in the way. And also, please consider this: the rulings of our courts are respected and obeyed because we as citizens pledge to accept and honor them. Most importantly, our president, who has a constitutional obligation to faithfully execute the laws, swears to accept them. What happens when the president disregards the court's rulings as illegitimate? When he disregards the rule of law? That, my fellow citizens, breaks our republic. Finally, as you view the evidence today, also consider this: President Trump knew from unassailable sources that his election fraud claims were false. He admitted he had lost the election. He took actions consistent with that belief. Claims that President Trump actually thought the election was stolen are not supported by fact and are not a defense. There is no defense that Donald Trump was duped or irrational. No president can defy the rule of law and act this way in a constitutional republic, period. Mr. Chairman, our nation's federal judges are sworn to do impartial justice, to preserve our Constitution and preserve our Union. Dozens of these judges have been addressing January 6th cases, and many have given us plain, unmistakable warnings about the direction of our republic. Let me read from one judge's statement given at a recent sentencing hearing. Quote, "High-ranking members of Congress and state officials who know perfectly well the claim of fraud was and is untrue, and that the election was legitimate, are so afraid of losing their power they won't say so. It has to be crystal clear that it is not patriotism, it is not standing up for America, to stand up for one man who knows full well that he lost, instead of the Constitution he was trying to subvert." Mr. Chairman, the violence and lawlessness of January 6th was unjustifiable, but our nation cannot only punish the foot soldiers who stormed our Capitol.
No, you can't.
Those who planned to overturn our election and brought us to the point of violence must also be accountable. With every effort to excuse or
You should have been
justify
held
the
accountable
conduct of the
first.
former president, we chip away at the foundation of our republic.
But I understand you have to
Indefensible
go from the
conduct
bottom
is
up.
defended. Inexcusable conduct is excused. Without accountability, it all becomes normal and it will recur. So as we watch the evidence today, please consider where our nation is in its history. Consider whether we can survive for another 246 years. Most people in most places on earth have not been free. America is an exception. And America continues
Certain
only
people
because we bind ourselves
are
to our
free.
founders' principles,
We have a lot of
to our
problems.
Constitution. We recognize that some principles must be beyond politics, inviolate, and more important than any single American who has ever lived. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Without objections, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very shortly after the election, we begin this meeting by returning to election night, November 3rd, 2020. As the chairman noted, we've previously presented testimony about how the election results were expected to come in that night. In certain states, ballots cast by mail before Election Day would be counted only after the polls closed that evening. That meant that election results would not be known for some time. Although President Trump's campaign manager, Bill Stepien, House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, and Jared Kushner had advised Donald Trump to encourage mail-in voting by Republicans, President Trump did not do so.
Yeah, I just remember generally, you had people arguing that we had a very, very robust get out the vote effort, and that, mail-in ballots could be a good thing for us if we looked at it correctly.
There was one meeting that was had in particular. I invited Kevin McCarthy to join the meeting, he being of like mind on the issue with me, in which we made our case.
Right now, they're showing all the highlights from previous interviews and committee hearings, and I'm going to let us finish listening to what they have, and then I'm going to give my commentary.
But the president's mind was made up.
So it was expected before the election that the initial counts in some states, in other words, those votes cast on election day, would be more heavily Republican. And this would create the false perception of a lead for President Trump, a so-called red mirage. But as the results of the absentee ballots that were later counted, there could be trends towards Vice President Biden as those mail-in ballots were counted. Now, on election night, Donald Trump's advisors specifically told him he didn't have a factual basis to declare victory. He should wait for the remaining ballots to be counted. Here is campaign manager Bill Stepien.
It was far too early to be making any calls like that. Ballots were still being counted. Ballots were still going to be counted for days. And it was far too early to be making any proclamation like that. I believe my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race.
But President Trump did declare victory in the late hours of election night. Not only did he declare victory, he also called for the ongoing count of votes to just stop. Stopping the count would have violated both federal and state laws and also disenfranchised millions of voters who lawfully cast their vote. He called for that action anyway. Here's what he said.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country.
You are an embarrassment.
We were getting ready to win this election.
You were cheating
Frankly,
your
we
ass
did
off,
win this
yellow,
election.
purple, orange monster.
We want all voting to stop.
So easy for him to lie.
We now know more about President Trump's intention for election night.
Jesus
The evidence
Christ.
shows that his false victory speech was planned well in advance, before any votes had been counted. It was a premeditated plan by the president to declare victory no matter what the actual result was. He made a plan to stay in office before Election Day. Now, the vice president's staff was concerned with what Donald Trump might do on election night. They took steps to ensure that Mr. Pence would not echo a false victory announcement from President Trump. Here's what the vice president's counsel, Greg Jacob, told us about his preparations with the vice president's chief of staff, Mark Short.
Mark had indicated to me that there was a possibility that there would be a declaration of victory within the White House that some might push for. And this is prior to the election results being known. And that he was trying to figure out a way of avoiding the vice president sort of being thrust into a position of needing to opine on that when he might not have sufficient information to do so.
Now, following this conversation, Mr. Jacob drafted a memo to Mr. Short, which the select committee got from the National Archives. The memo was sent on November 3rd, Election Day, and advised it is essential that the Vice President not be perceived by the public as having decided questions concerning disputed electoral votes prior to the full development of all relevant facts. A few days before the election, Mr. Trump also consulted with one of his outside advisors, inside activist Tom Fitton, about the strategy for election night. The Select Committee got this pre-prepared statement from the National Archives. As you can see, the draft statement, which was sent on October 31st, declares, "We had an election today, and I won." And the Fitton memo specifically indicates a plan that only the votes counted by the election day deadline, and there is no election day deadline, would matter. Everyone knew that ballot counting would lawfully continue past election day. Claiming that the counting on election night must stop before millions of votes were counted was, as we now know, a key part of President Trump's premeditated plan. On election day, just after 5 p.m., Mr. Fitton indicated he'd spoken with the president about the statement. Sending along again, just talked to him about the draft below. Again, this plan to keep, to declare victory was in place before any of the results had been determined. In the course of our investigation, we also interviewed Brad Parscale, President Trump's former campaign manager. He told us he understood that President Trump planned as early as July that he would say he won the election even if he lost.
He said it out
And
loud.
just a few days before the election, Steve Bannon, a former Trump chief White House strategist and outside advisor to President Trump, spoke to a group of his associates from China and said this.
And what Trump's going to do is just declare victory.
Right, I saw
He's
that.
going to declare victory. But that doesn't mean he's the winner. He's just going to say he's the winner.
They say what they're going to do out loud. I don't understand why we're going through all this. All these people need to be in jail.
And so they're going to have a natural disadvantage, and Trump's going to take advantage of it. That's our strategy. He's going to declare himself a winner. So when you wake up Wednesday morning, it's going to be a firestorm. Also, if Trump is losing by 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it's going to be even crazier.
Mm.
No, because he's going to sit right there and say they stole it.
Agree.
I'm directing the Attorney General to shut down all ballot places in all 50 states. It's going to be no. He's not going out easy. Trump, if Biden's winning, Trump is going to do some crazy shit.
As you know, Mr. Bannon refused to testify in our investigation. He's been convicted of criminal contempt of Congress, and he's awaiting sentencing. But the evidence indicates that Mr. Bannon had advanced knowledge of Mr. Trump's intent to declare victory falsely on election night, but also that Mr. Bannon knew about Mr. Trump's planning for January 6th. Here's what Bannon said on January 5th.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's all converging, and now we're on, as they say, the point of attack, right? The point of attack tomorrow. I'll tell you this. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen, okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different. And all I can say is strap in. You have made this happen, and tomorrow it's game day. So strap in.
Wow.
Let's get ready.
Another close associate of Donald Trump apparently knew of Mr. Trump's intentions as well. Now, Roger Stone is a political operative with a reputation for dirty tricks. In November 2019, he was convicted of lying to Congress and other crimes and sentenced to more than 3 years in prison. He's also a longtime advisor to President Trump and was in communication with President Trump throughout 2020. Mr. Trump pardoned Roger Stone on December 23rd, 2020. Now, recently, the Select Committee got footage of Mr. Stone before and after the election from Danish filmmaker Christopher Gulbrandsen, pursuant to a subpoena. Right before the election, here's Roger Stone talking about what President Trump would do after the election.
Let's just hope we're celebrating. I really do suspect it'll still be up in the air. When
They
that
said
happens, the
the
key
quiet
thing to
parts
do is to
out
claim
loud.
victory.
This is
Possession is 9 tenths of the law.
unbelievable.
No, we won. Fuck you. Sorry, over. We won. You're wrong. Fuck you.
Wow.
I said, fuck the Lord, and let's get right to the violence. That's what I'm doing. Start smashing pumpkins if you know what I mean.
The Select Committee called Mr. Stone as a witness, but he invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination.
Do you believe the violence on January 6th was justified?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer your question on the basis of the Fifth Amendment.
And Mr. Stone,
But if
did
he
you
did
have any
nothing wrong.
role in planning for the violence on January 6th?
Once again, I will assert my Fifth Amendment right to decline to answer your question.
Although we don't yet have all the relevant records of Roger Stone's communications, even Stone's own social media posts acknowledge that he spoke with Donald Trump on December 27th as preparations for January 6th were underway.
Right. They
In
all
this
knew.
post, you can see how Roger Stone talked about his conversations with President Trump. He wrote, "I also told the president exactly how he can appoint a special counsel with full subpoena power to ensure those who are attempting to steal the 2020 election through voter fraud are charged and convicted, and to ensure Donald Trump continues as our president." As we know by now, the idea for a special counsel was not just an idle suggestion. It was something President Trump had actually tried to do earlier that month. We know that Roger Stone was at the Willard Hotel on January 5th and 6th, and we know from other witness testimony that President Trump asked his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, to speak with Roger Stone and General Michael Flynn that night. In addition to his connection to President Trump, Roger Stone maintained extensive direct connections to two groups responsible for violently attacking the Capitol, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. Individuals from both of these organizations have been charged with the crime of seditious conspiracy. Now, what is seditious conspiracy? It is a conspiracy to use violent force against the United States, to oppose the lawful authority of the United States. Multiple associates of Roger Stone from both the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys have been charged with this crime. Close associates of Roger Stone, including Joshua James, have pled guilty to this crime. We know that at least 7 Oath Keepers who have been criminally charged provided personal security for Roger Stone or were seen with him on January 6th or in the weeks leading up to January 6th. For example, Joshua James, the leader of the Alabama Oath Keepers, provided security for Roger Stone and was with him on January 5th. This is the picture of the two together on January 5th. James entered the Capitol on January 6th.
What is
He
wrong with his
assaulted a
face?
police officer. Earlier this year, he pled guilty to seditious conspiracy and obstruction of Congress.
That's what they should do.
Another example is the married couple, Kelly and Connie Meggs. Now, Kelly Meggs was the leader of the Florida chapter of the Oath Keepers. Both he and his wife provided security for Roger Stone, and both are charged with leading a military-style stack attack of Oath Keepers, attacking the Capitol on January 6th. Perhaps even more disturbing is Roger Stone's close association with Enrique Tarrio, the national chairman of the Proud Boys. Roger Stone's connection with Enrique Tarrio and the Proud Boys is well documented by video evidence with phone records the Select Committee has obtained. Tarrio, along with other Proud Boys, has been charged with multiple crimes concerning the attack on January 6th, including seditious conspiracy. During the attack, Tarrio sent a message to other Proud Boys claiming, "We did that." He also visited the White House on December 12th. Later that day, he posted a disturbing video claiming credit for the attack. This video, posted on January 6th, was apparently created prior to the attack.
Wow.
This big lie,
They knew.
President
They
Trump's
knew.
effort
They
to
knew.
convince Americans that he had won
Why
the
is this man
2020
still
election
walking around?
began before the
What?
election results even came in. It was intentional. It was premeditated. It was not based on election results or any evidence of actual fraud affecting the results or any actual problems with voting machines. It was a plan concocted in advance to convince his supporters that he won. And the people who seemingly knew about that plan in advance would ultimately play a significant role in the events of January 6th. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very shortly after the election, the Trump campaign recognized that they had likely lost the election, and they informed Donald Trump of that fact. Even before the networks called the race for President Biden on November 7th, his chances of pulling out a victory were virtually non-existent, and President Trump knew it.
Do you know if anybody ever told the president that he had lost and that
They didn't have
there
to tell him
wasn't a
he
chance of him
knew.
winning?
Shut up.
I know that the president, when the networks called it, of course, he was informed about the network decision. That afternoon, at some point, myself and a handful of other folks went over and sat down with the president and communicated that the odds of us prevailing in legal challenges were very small.
You know, after the election, as of November 7th, in your judgment, what were the chances of President Trump winning the election?
After that point?
Yes.
None.
At times, President Trump acknowledged the reality of his loss.
He knew.
Although he publicly claimed that he had won the election, privately, he admitted that Joe Biden would take over as president. Here's a few examples of that.
So we're in the Oval and there's a discussion going on. And the president says, I think it could have been Pompeo, but he says words to the effect of, yeah, we lost. We need to let that issue go to the next guy, meaning President Biden.
I remember maybe a week after the election was called, I popped into the Oval just to give the president the headlines and see how he was doing. And he was looking at the TV and he said, "Can you believe I lost to this effing guy?"
Mark raised it with me on the 18th. And so following that conversation where the motorcade ride,
Everything started with her.
White House.
Had not she came and said what she said,
and
a lot of people would have just stayed silent.
Lost, but he wants to keep fighting it.
So,
he thinks that there might
even
be
though
enough
she's
to
no
overturn
angel
the election,
either.
But he pretty much has acknowledged that he's lost.
Knowing that he had lost and that he had only weeks left in office, President Trump rushed to complete his unfinished business. One key example is this. President Trump issued an order for large-scale U.S. troop withdrawals. He disregarded concerns about the consequences for fragile governments on the front lines of the fight against ISIS and al-Qaeda terrorists. Knowing he was leaving office, he acted immediately.
Trump is a
signed
clear
this
present
order on
danger.
November 11th,
Seriously,
which would have
still
required
is.
the immediate withdrawal of troops from Somalia and Afghanistan, all to be complete before the Biden inauguration on January 20th. As you watch these clips, recall that General Keith Kellogg was the national security advisor to the vice president and had served as chief of staff to the National Security Council for President Trump. And General Milley was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon.
Are you familiar with a memo that the president reportedly signed on November 11th, 2020, ordering that troops be withdrawn from Afghanistan and Somalia?
Yes. So I think you might have seen some things where there's a memo or something from Johnny McEntee to Douglas McGregor. It says, here's your task to get U.S. forces out of out of Somalia, get U.S. forces out of Afghanistan.
When you first interviewed and met Colonel Douglas McGregor, is it fair to say you discussed this decision of withdrawing from Somalia and Afghanistan, correct?
Yeah, I'm sure that was part of it, yeah.
And that was the position that he was taking over there was senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense, is that correct?
Yes.
So on that same day, just so I'm clear, he responded back to you that they, meaning DOD leadership, was not going to take any of those steps without an order.
Without a directive, yeah.
I explained in language that should be in the order while I was in the meeting with McEntee, and this was my answer to him. I said, if you want this to happen, or the president wants this to happen, he's got to write an order.
So you never wrote this down in any capacity?
I sketched on a piece of paper for him some key statements. The president directs. This is, what's the right word? Boilerplate language?
Who within his office drafted the order?
It was myself and one of my assistants.
McEntee duly types it up, brings it in to the president. President signs it, and boom, it's over, faxed over, or emailed, scanned over to Caspatel, delivers it to me.
Was it by auto
How was he not in
or was
jail?
it the president himself signing it?
Anybody else doing this kind of damage would have been under the jail by now. It doesn't matter whether he's president or not.
And who obtained that signature?
I did.
It is odd. It is non-standard. It is potentially dangerous. I personally thought it was militarily not feasible nor wise.
And I proceeded to tell the PPO and proceeded to tell McGregor that if I ever saw anything like that, I would do something physical. Because I thought what that was done was a tremendous disservice to the nation. And by the way, it was a very, very contested issue. There were people who did not agree with getting out of Afghanistan. I appreciate their concerns. An immediate departure that memo said would have been a catastrophic. It's the same thing what President Biden went through. It would have been a debacle.
Oh, Lord.
Keep in mind, the order was for an immediate withdrawal. It would have been catastrophic. And yet, President Trump signed the order. These are the highly consequential actions of a president who knows his term will shortly end. At the same time that President Trump was acknowledging privately that he had lost the election, he was hearing that there was no evidence of fraud or irregularities sufficient to change the outcome.
But they were Republicans, the one that got caught doing it.
I remember
Unbelievable.
a call with Mr. Meadows,
Narcissistic ass.
where Mr. Meadows was asking me what I was finding and if I was finding anything. And I remember sharing with him that we weren't finding anything that would be sufficient to change the results in any of the key states.
When was that conversation?
Probably in November, mid to late November. I think it was before my child was born.
Mm.
And what was Mr. Meadows' reaction to that information?
I believe the words he used were, "So there's no there there."
It would be our job to track it down and come up dry because the allegation didn't prove to be true. And we'd have to, relay the news that, that tip that someone told you about those votes or that fraud or, nothing came of it. That would be our job as the truth-telling squad, and not a fun job to be it's an easier job to be telling the president about wild allegations. It's a harder job to be telling him on the back end that
Right now, we're just getting a recap of all the people that came forward and gave their testimony. So they're rehashing that for those that didn't keep up with the trials as they went along. And I'm just giving my commentary on the back end and as we go, because I've seen most of it. And I'm just waiting for them to really lay out everything so we can see what's going on. So let's get back to this one.
Was not sufficient to be outcome determinative.
Look, it's the right of any candidate to litigate genuine election disputes. Nobody argues that, but President Trump's litigation was completely unsuccessful. In our past hearings, we told you that the committee had identified a total of 62 election lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign and its allies between November 4th and January 6th of 2021. Those cases resulted in 61 losses and only a single victory, which did not affect the outcome for any candidate. The claims were not supported by any sufficient evidence of fraud or irregularities. In fact, they were baseless, as judges repeatedly recognized. In none of these 62 cases was President Trump able to establish any viable claims of election fraud sufficient to overturn the results of the election. In those hearings, we shared with you the words used by judges around the country in rejecting the Trump campaign's claims. It's strong language criticizing the lack of evidentiary support for the claims of election fraud in those lawsuits. For example, a federal appeals court in Pennsylvania wrote, quote, "Charges require specific allegations and proof. We have neither here." A federal judge in Wisconsin wrote, quote, "The court has allowed the former president the chance to make his case, and he has lost on the merits." Another judge in Michigan called the claims, quote, "nothing but speculation and conjecture that votes for President Trump were either destroyed, discarded, or switched to votes for Vice President Biden." A federal judge in Michigan sanctioned 9 attorneys, including Sidney Powell, for making frivolous.
How do you lose 62 court cases telling you that you lost and you have there's no merit to what you're doing, and you just consistently lie? I don't get it. I don't understand why people are not calling, more people are not calling this guy out on the Republican side. From what I'm seeing, your end game is to take over the United States. And you're all in on it, and you all need to suffer the consequences like your boy Donald Trump.
Or inaccurate results significant enough to invalidate the results of the 2020 presidential election. On December 11th, Trump's allies lost a lawsuit in the U.S. Supreme Court that he regarded as his last chance at success in the courts. A newly obtained Secret Service message from that day shows how angry President Trump was about the outcome. Quote, "Just FYI, POTUS is pissed. Breaking news, Supreme Court denied his lawsuit. He is livid now." Cassidy Hutchison, an aide to Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, was present for that conversation and described it in this way.
This is the day that the Supreme Court had rejected that case. Mr. Meadows and I were in the White House residence at a Christmas reception. And as we were walking back from the Christmas reception that evening, the president was walking out of the Oval Office, so we crossed paths in the Rose Garden colonnade. The president was fired up about the Supreme Court decision. And so I was standing next to Mr. Meadows, but I stepped back, so I was probably 2-3 feet catty corner from a diagonal from him. The president's just raging.
When she came in, she told everything, not just what she saw, she told what people told her. So it lit up a lot of stuff, and a lot of people had to come in and show what side they were on. They were either going to tell the truth or they were going to go down with a burning ship.
So he had said something to the effect of, "I don't want people to know we lost, Mark. This is embarrassing. Figure it out. We need to figure it out. I don't want people to know that we lost."
Our country is a country of laws where every person, including the president, must follow the law and respect the judgment of our courts. President Trump's closest advisors held that view both then and now.
Well, do you believe the president should abide by the rulings of the courts?
Oh, yes, we should all comply with the law at all times, to the best of our ability, every one of us.
So once the courts had ruled and the Electoral College had met, the election was over in your view?
Yes, I think I've said previously that when the vice president made the certification and the litigation was complete, it was complete.
When the Electoral College met on the 14th?
Yes, as of December 14th, is that right? I think that's the right date, yes.
I assume, Pat, that you would agree the president is obligated to abide by the rulings of the courts.
Of course.
And I assume you also would.
Everybody is obligated to abide by rules, of course.
And I assume you also would agree the president has a particular obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
That is one of the president's obligations, correct?
Ivanka, do you believe the president is obligated to abide by the rulings of the courts?
I do.
By mid-December of 2020, President Trump's senior staff were attempting to persuade him to concede the election outcome.
But if your question is, did I believe he should concede the election at a point in time? Yes, I did.
December 14th was the day that the states certified their votes and sent them to Congress. And in my view, that was the end of the matter. I didn't see, I thought that this would lead inexorably to a new administration.
I told him that my personal viewpoint was that the Electoral College had met, which is the system that our country is set under to elect a president and vice president. And I believed at that point that the means for him to pursue litigation was probably closed.
And you recall what his response, if any, was?
He disagreed.
Secretary of Labor Gene Scalia, the son of late Justice Scalia, visited President Trump in mid-December and explained the situation clearly.
And so I had to put a call into the president. I might have called on the 13th. We spoke, I believe, on the 14th, in which I conveyed to him that I thought that it was time for him to acknowledge that President Biden had prevailed in the election. But I communicated to the president that when that legal process is exhausted and when the electors have voted, that's the point at which that outcome needs to be expected. I told him that I did believe, yes, that once those legal processes were run, if fraud had not been established, that had affected the outcome of the election, that unfortunately I believed that what had to be done was concede the outcome.
Not only did the courts reject President Trump's fraud and other allegations, his Department of Justice appointees, including Bill Barr, Jeffrey Rosen, and Richard Donahue, did as well. President Trump knew the truth. He heard what all his experts and senior staff were telling him. He knew he had lost the election, but he made the deliberate choice to ignore the courts, to ignore the Justice Department, to ignore his campaign leadership, to ignore senior advisors, and to pursue a completely unlawful effort to overturn the election. His intent was plain: ignore the rule of law and stay in power. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Virginia, Ms. Luria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mid-December was a turning point. President Trump made a decision, a choice, to ignore the courts and his advisors and to push forward to overturn the election.
He was like, I don't give
His
up.
efforts to overturn the election were not random or disconnected. Rather, they were part of a coordinated, multi-part plan to ensure that he stayed in power. Donald Trump was the driver behind each part of this plan. He was personally and directly involved.
Donald Trump is a poor little rich boy who wasn't loved by his mother and got every toy that he wanted. He wanted the United States as his toy. He saw this as a game and people fell for it. You're still falling for it. I don't understand. This is not about black and white. This is about a rich kid not getting what the fuck he wants.
His election fraud claims were false. He still repeated the claims in the days and weeks that followed. Sometimes, even the very next day.
I specifically raised the Dominion voting machines, which I found to be among the most disturbing allegations. Disturbing in the sense that I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations. I told them that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that. and it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
You did his bidding, though, my
We
guy.
have a company that's very suspect. Its name is Dominion. With the turn of a dial or the change of a chip, you can press a button for Trump and the vote goes to Biden. What kind of a system is this?
We definitely talked about Antrim County again. That was sort of done at that point because the hand recount had been done and all of that. But we cited back to that to say, you know, this is an example of what people are telling you and what's being filed in some of these court filings that are just not supported by the evidence. And this is the problem. The problem is people keep telling you these things and they turn out not to be true.
In addition, there is the highly troubling matter of Dominion voting systems. In one Michigan county alone, 6,000 votes were switched from Trump to Biden, and the same systems are used in the majority of states in our country.
I went into this and would, you know, tell them how crazy some of these allegations were and how ridiculous some of them were. And I'm talking about some of them like, you know, more absentee votes were cast in Pennsylvania than there were absentee ballots requests. You know, stuff like that. It was just easy to blow up. There was never an indication of interest in what the actual facts were.
There were more votes than there were voters. Think of that. You had more votes than you had voters. That's an easy one to figure.
You're a liar.
And by the thousands.
You're a liar.
He raised the big vote dump, as he called it, in Detroit. And that, you know, he said people saw boxes coming into the counting station at all hours of the morning. And I said, Mr. President, there are 630 precincts in Detroit, and unlike elsewhere in the state, they centralized the counting process, so they're not counted in each precinct. They're moved to counting stations, and so the normal process would involve boxes coming in at all
Dude is
different
an
hours.
idiot. He thinks everybody else is just as dumb.
This
oh
is
my
Michigan.
God, unreal.
At 6:31 in the morning, a vote dump of 149,772
None of that shit even makes sense. Shut the
votes
fuck up.
came in unexpectedly.
They came in and you knew they were coming.
Interviewed the witnesses. There is no suitcase. The president kept fixating on this suitcase that supposedly had fraudulent ballots and that the suitcase was rolled out from under the table. And I said, no, sir, there is no suitcase. You can watch that video over and over. There is no suitcase. There is a wheeled bin where they carry the ballots, and that's just how they move ballots around that facility. There's nothing suspicious about that at all.
Election officials pull boxes, Democrats.
Oh my God, I
and
hate him.
suitcases of ballots out from under a table. You all saw it on television. Totally fraudulent.
This happened over and over again, and our committee's report will document it. Purposeful lies made in public directly at odds with what Donald Trump knew from unassailable sources, the Justice Department's own investigations and his own campaign. Donald Trump maliciously repeated this nonsense to a wide audience over and over again. His intent was to deceive. President Trump's plan also involved trying to coerce government officials to change the election outcome in the states he lost. He personally reached out to numerous state officials and pressured them to take unlawful steps to alter the election results in those states. These actions, taken directly by the president himself, made it clear what his intentions were: to prevent the orderly transfer of power. We all recall, for example, President Trump's tape-recorded call with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger.
This is crazy.
At the time this call occurred, President Trump had already been told repeatedly by the U.S. Justice Department, by his campaign, and by his advisors that his allegations of fraud in Georgia were false.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. Look, we need Only 11,000 votes. We have far more than that as it stands now. We'll have more and more. So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes.
Come on, guys. Come on, fellas. Help me
I
out.
just want to find 11,780 votes. That's an extraordinary demand by the president, especially since he already knew from the Justice Department there was no genuine basis for this request. No one could think it would be legal for the Secretary of State to simply find the votes the president needed in order to win. Secretary Raffensperger told the president the truth, that he lost the election in Georgia. But President Trump did not accept that answer. Instead, he suggested that Secretary Raffensperger himself might be prosecuted.
That's a criminal offense.
Oh, that's right. He wanted to jail all of his political enemies.
To you
He
and
was
to
coming
Ryan,
after everybody.
your lawyer, that's a big
Rock
risk.
your ass going to jail.
We know that President Trump's White House advisors reacted negatively. Immediately after the call, Cassidy Hutchinson had a conversation with Chief of Staff Mark Meadows.
I remember looking at Mark and I said, Mark, you can't possibly think we're going to pull this off. Like, that call was crazy. And he looked at me and just started shaking his head and he was like, no, Cass, he knows it's over.
Right.
He knows he lost, but we're going to keep trying. There's some good options out there still. We're going to keep trying.
This call and other related activity is now the focus of an ongoing criminal investigation in Fulton County, Georgia. And Georgia is not the only state where President Trump tried to pressure state officials to change the results. He also attempted to pressure state officials in Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Michigan to change the results.
For anybody that's just tuning in, they're going over the last few meetings that they had and what the outcomes were, and they're meshing them all together. So we're just getting a recap until they get to what they're going to present today. Hopefully, we'll learn more today and come to some kind of conclusion and maybe a fix so this will never happen again, because this is just outrageous. The information that's coming out is just outrageous. There is no way I would have thought in my 60 years that I would have seen something like this happening. But it's just a matter of another rich man wanted something to play with, and he wasn't given his way. And this is what happens. This is what happens. I blame his mama. She should have used birth control.
Clark's proposal. Here's why they said they forcefully rejected it.
And I recall toward the end saying, what you're proposing is nothing less than the United States Justice Department meddling in the outcome of a presidential election.
But more importantly, this was not based on fact. This was actually contrary to the facts as developed by Department investigations over the last several weeks and months. So I responded to that, and for the department to insert itself into the political process this way, I think would have had grave consequences for the country. It may very well have spiraled us into a constitutional crisis.
We know from our investigation that President Trump offered Jeff Clark the position of acting attorney general, and that Jeff Clark had decided to accept it. The only reason this ultimately did not happen is that the White House counsel and a number of Justice Department officials confronted the president in the Oval Office and threatened mass resignation.
And then, and I said something to the effect of, you're going to have a huge personnel blowout within hours, because you're going to have all kinds of problems with resignations and other issues. And that's not going to be in anyone's interest.
The president ultimately relented only because the entire leadership of the Department of Justice, as well as his White House counsel, threatened to resign. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Mrs. Murphy, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Trump's efforts to unlawfully overturn the results of the 2020 election were not limited to the big lie and pressuring state officials and the Department of Justice officials. Another key part of the president's effort was a scheme to assemble fake electors to cast false electoral votes in the states that President Trump lost. This was something done not only with the president's knowledge, but also with his direct participation. Ronna McDaniel, chair of the Republican National Committee, testified before this committee that President Trump and his attorney, Dr. John Eastman, called her and asked her to arrange for the fake electors to meet and rehearse the process of casting their fake votes.
When I received the call, again, I don't remember the exact date. It was from the White House switchboard, and it was President Trump who had contacted me.
And did President Trump have anyone else on the line with him?
He introduced me to a gentleman named John Eastman. So I vaguely remember him mentioning that he was a professor, and then essentially he turned the call over to Mr. Eastman, who then proceeded to talk about the importance of the RNC helping the campaign gather these contingent electors in case any of the legal challenges that were ongoing changed the result of any of the states.
These fake electors were ultimately part of the president's plan to replace genuine Biden electors with Trump electors on January 6th. As part of this plan, the false electoral slates were sent to the National Archives and to the Capitol. The fake electors plan was also tied to another plan, the coercive pressure campaign to make Vice President Mike Pence reject or refuse to count certain Biden electoral votes so that President Donald Trump would, quote, win re-election instead. Here is what Vice President Pence has said about this scheme.
President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. But President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election.
No, you did not.
The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
Make no mistake, President Trump knew that what he was demanding Vice President Pence do
was against
illegal.
the law.
He was informed of this repeatedly, and specifically on January 4th. Even his lawyer, John Eastman, admitted in front of President Trump that this plan would break the law by violating the Electoral Count Act.
Did John Eastman ever admit, as far as you know, in front of the president, that his proposal would violate the Electoral Count Act?
I believe he did on the 4th.
And Dr. Eastman confirmed this in writing. Recall this email written on January 6, in which Vice President Pence's counsel asked Dr. Eastman, did you advise the president that in your professional judgment, the vice president does not have power to decide things unilaterally? Dr. Eastman replied, he's been so advised.
So he
Of
can't
course,
say he
President
didn't know.
Trump's own White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, also recognized that this plan was unlawful. Here is Mr. Cipollone's testimony.
My view is that the vice president didn't have the legal authority to do anything except what he did.
There is no doubt that President Trump's pressure campaign on Vice President Pence was significant. On the morning of January 6, President Trump called the vice president from the Oval Office and demanded that he overturn the results of the election. Numerous witnesses told the Select Committee about the invective that President Trump leveled at his own vice president.
Something to the effect, the wording's wrong. I made the wrong decision 4 or 5 years ago.
And
Wow.
the word that she relayed to that the president called the vice president, I apologize for being impolite, but do you remember what she said her father called him?
The P word.
But Vice President Pence didn't waver even when his own life was endangered by President Trump and the rioters at the Capitol on January 6th, as you'll see in more detail later. A federal judge concluded, based on this and other evidence, that President Trump's pressure campaign against the vice president likely violated multiple criminal
Trump
statutes.
wouldn't bust a grape in a
In
fruit
the end,
fight.
all these people,
Bitch ass.
Department of Justice officials, state elections officials, his own vice president, stood strong in the face of President Trump's immense pressure. But as we now know, President Trump had already summoned tens of thousands of his supporters to Washington on January 6th to take back their country.
Take it from where?
On December 19th, President Trump first told his supporters to come to Washington.
Oh
In
my
this
God.
and numerous other tweets, he fraudulently and repeatedly promoted January 6th as the day Americans could come and change the election outcome. For weeks, President Trump worked with others to plan the rally, intending all along that he would send an assembled crowd of angry supporters to the Capitol after his speech on the ellipse on January 6th. We obtained a text message that one rally organizer sent on January 4th. In part, it reads that, quote, POTUS is going to have us march there / the Capitol, and POTUS is going to just call for it unexpectedly. Again, each of these examples, the big lie, the pressure campaigns against state officials, the pressure campaign against the Department of Justice and his vice president, the fake electors, summoning the mob, all of this demonstrates President Trump's personal and substantial role in the plot to overturn the election. He was intimately involved. He was the central player.
Wow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In our past hearings, you have seen direct evidence that President Trump sent a crowd of his supporters to the Capitol on January 6th, knowing they were armed and angry. This was the last, most desperate and dangerous prong of his plan to disrupt the joint session and prevent the orderly transition of power. On the morning of the 6th, the Secret Service was at the ellipse, screening the members of the crowd as they entered the rally site.
He knew there were weapons.
And they noticed something significant about the crowd.
He knew.
Tens of thousands of people were outside the rally site, but did not want to go through the magnetometers, the metal detectors that were used to screen for dangerous weapons. Since our last hearings, the Select Committee has received greater cooperation from the Secret Service. Nevertheless, Secret Service text messages from this period were erased in the days and months following the attack on the Capitol, even though documents and materials related to January 6th had already been requested by the Department of Justice and Congress. But we were able to obtain nearly 1 million emails, recordings, and other electronic records from the Secret Service. Over the month of August, the Select Committee began its review of hundreds of thousands of pages and multiple hours of that material, providing substantial new evidence about what happened on January 6th and the days leading up to it. That review continues. What you're about to hear is just a sample of the new and relevant evidence that we have received. Mounting evidence before January 6th predicted violence, and not just violence generally, but violence directed at the Capitol. Intelligence about this risk was directly available to the U.S. Secret Service and others in the White House in advance of the ellipse speech, in advance of the march to the Capitol. The committee has shown evidence that President Trump was aware of the risk of violence. The FBI, U.S. Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police, and other agencies all gathered and disseminated intelligence suggesting the possibility of violence at the Capitol prior to the riot. We're now going to show you just a sample of the evidence we have received. Days before January 6th, the president's senior advisors at the Department of Justice and FBI, for example, received an intelligence summary that included material indicating that certain people traveling to Washington were making plans to attack the Capitol. This summary noted online calls to occupy federal buildings, rhetoric about invading the Capitol building, and plans to arm themselves and to engage in political violence at the event. Other agencies were also hearing predictions.
When we thought these were just dog whistles and nothing was going to come of it, they were actually mobilizing. And if this guy decides to do it again, who's to say that they won't come again for the Capitol or whatever city? Who knows who he has lying in wait? The guy is a clear and present danger to the United States.
So during these calls, I only remember in hindsight because he was almost like clairvoyant. Norquist says during one of these calls, the greatest threat is a direct assault on the Capitol. I'll never forget it.
This email, for example, was an alert that the Secret Service received on December 24th with the heading, "Armed and Ready, Mr. President." According to the intelligence, multiple users online were targeting members of Congress, instructing others to march into the chambers on January 6th and make sure they know who to fear. In this report, received on December 26th, the Secret Service field office relayed a tip that had been received by the FBI. According to the source of the tip, the Proud Boys plan to march armed into D.C. They think that they will have a large enough group to march into D.C. armed, the source reported, and will outnumber the police so they can't be stopped. The source went on to say, their plan is to literally kill people. Please take this tip seriously and investigate further. The source also made clear that the Proud Boys had detailed their plans on multiple websites, like the Donald.win. Let's pause here. The Secret Service had advance information more than 10 days beforehand regarding the Proud Boys' planning for January 6th. We know now, of course, that the Proud Boys and others did lead the assault on our Capitol building. On December 31st, agents circulated intelligence reports that President Trump's supporters have proposed a movement to occupy Capitol Hill. In particular, they flagged spikes in violent hashtags like "We Are the Storm," 1776 Rebel, and Occupy Capitals. On January 5th, a Secret Service open source unit flagged a social media account on the Donald.win that threatened to bring a sniper rifle to a rally on January 6th. The user also posted a picture of a handgun and rifle with the caption, "Sunday Gun Day," providing Overwatch January 6th will be wild. Later, on the evening of January 5th, the Secret Service learned during an FBI briefing that right-wing groups were establishing armed QRFs, or Quick Reaction Forces, readying to deploy for January 6th. Groups like the Oath Keepers were standing by at the ready should POTUS request assistance. By invoking the Insurrection Act, agents were informed. As we all know now, the Oath Keepers did play a specific role on January 6th and had stashed weapons in Virginia for further violence that evening. Also on that day, the Secret Service was readying its security precautions with the president's speech at the Ellipse the next day. A Secret Service deputy chief instructed agents to add certain objects to the list of items that would be prohibited at the rally site, including ballistic vests, tactical vests, armored or not, and ballistic helmets. By the morning of January 6th, it was clear that the Secret Service anticipated violence. It felt like the calm before the storm, one agent predicted in a Protective Intelligence Division chat group. Another remarked how agents were watching the crazies on live stream. By 9:09 that morning, the Secret Service could also see that many rally goers were assembled outside the security perimeter. One agent emailed, possibly because they have stuff that couldn't come through, would probably be an issue with this crowd. Just a thought. By 9:30 that morning, agents reported more than 25,000 people outside the rally site. An hour later, the Secret Service reported that the crowd was on the mall watching, but not in line. The head of the President's Secret Service Protective Detail, Robert Engel, was specifically aware of the large crowds outside the magnetometers. He passed that information along to Tony Ornato, who worked for Mark Meadows in the Chief of Staff's office. The documents we obtained from the Secret Service make clear that the crowd outside the magnetometers was armed and the agents knew it. Take a look at what they were seeing and hearing on the ground. One report from the rally site at 7:58 a.m. said, some members of the crowd are wearing ballistic helmets, body armor, carrying radio equipment, and military-grade backpacks. Another from 9:30 a.m. said that there were possibly OC spray, meaning pepper spray, and or plastic riot shields. At 11:23 a.m., agents also reported possible armed individuals, one with a Glock, one with a rifle. Over the next hour, agents reported possible man with a gun reported, confirmed pistol on hip located in a tree, and one detained at 14th and I Street Northwest. Individual had an assault rifle on his person. Minutes before President Trump began his speech, members of the Federal Protective Service, an agency tasked with protecting federal buildings, were alerted about an arrest of a protester with a gun on his waistband. And during the speech, the weapons-related arrests continued. At 12:13 p.m., United States Park Police arrested a man with a rifle in front of the World War II memorial. These agents remarked on the number of weapons that had been seized that day, speculating that the situation could get worse. With so many weapons found so far, you wonder how many are unknown, one agent wrote at 12:36 p.m. Could be sporty after dark. At 12:47 p.m., another agent responded, no doubt. The people at the Ellipse said they are moving to the Capitol after the POTUS speech. As the documents we received make clear, the Secret Service was aware of weapons possessed by those gathered at rallies in D.C. as early as the evening before. Take this document, for instance, which details multiple arrests in the crowds demonstrating on January 5th. Those arrests were for weapons offenses, handguns, high-capacity feeding devices, ammunition. What the Secret Service saw on the 6th was entirely consistent with the violent rhetoric circulating in the days before the joint session on pro-Trump websites, at times amplified by the president's own advisors. On one of these sites, as you've heard, one of those was called the Donald.win. The Select Committee has obtained a text message that Jason Miller, a senior communications advisor, sent to Mark Meadows less than a week before January 6th. I got the base fired up, he wrote in all caps. He sent a link to this page on the Donald.win. The linked webpage had comments about the joint session of Congress on January 6th. Take a look at some of those comments. Gallows don't require electricity. If the filthy commie maggots try to push their fraud through, there will be hell to pay. Our lawmakers in Congress can leave one of two ways. One, in a body bag. Two, after rightfully certifying Trump the winner. Mr. Miller claimed that he had no idea about the hundreds of comments like these in the link that he sent to Mark Meadows.
If I had seen something like that, I probably would have flipped it to someone at the White House. Or if I had seen something of that nature, I would have said, we got to flag this for Secret Service or something of that nature.
But the Trump administration was aware of this type of violent rhetoric prior to January 6th. In fact, as we have seen, the Secret Service and other agencies knew of the prospect of violence well in advance of the president's speech at the Ellipse. Despite this, certain White House and Secret Service witnesses previously testified that they had received no intelligence about violence that could have potentially threatened any of the protectees on January 6th, including the vice president. Evidence strongly suggests that this testimony is not credible, and the committee is reviewing additional material from the Secret Service and other sources. The Secret Service was monitoring this kind of online activity and was sharing and receiving the results of that effort. They work closely with other agencies, sharing intelligence about the joint session of Congress derived from social media and other sources. The same day Jason Miller sent his text message, agents received reports about a spike in activity on another platform called Parler. This was December 30th. In this email, an agent received a report noting a lot of violent rhetoric on Parler directed at government people and entities, including Secret Service protectees. One of these protectees was Vice President Pence, perhaps the primary target of President Trump's pressure campaign in the days leading up to January 6th. The day before the joint session, on January 5th, Secret Service was aware of increased chatter focused on Vice President Pence, in particular, whether he would do what President Trump wanted him to do, reverse the results of the election in the joint session the next day, January 6th. On the morning of the 6th, agents received alerts of online threats that Vice President Pence would be, quote, a dead man walking if he doesn't do the right thing. Another agent reported, quote, I saw several other alerts saying they will storm the Capitol if he doesn't do the right thing.
Wow.
The anger reflected in these postings was obvious, the man at the center of the storm on January 6th, President Trump. On the evening of January 5th, President Trump gathered a few of his communications staffers in the Oval Office. The door was open, allowing the president and others assembled there to hear the sounds of the crowd gathered at Freedom Plaza just a few blocks from the White House. President Trump could tell that his supporters were riled up. Here again is Judd Deere, a deputy White House press secretary, describing the president's reaction.
He knew.
He fairly quickly moved to how fired up the crowd is, or was going to be.
Okay, what did he say about it?
Just that they were fired up. They were angry. They feel like the election has been stolen, that the election was rigged, that we went on and on about that for a little bit.
Yes, the president knew the crowd was angry because he had stoked that anger. He knew that they believed that the election had been rigged and stolen because he had told them falsely that it had been rigged and stolen. And by the time he incited that angry mob to march on the Capitol, he knew they were armed and dangerous. All the better to stop the peaceful transfer of power. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. At this point in our meeting, we'll take a brief recess. Pursuant to the order of the committee of today, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
Okay. Looks like everybody's going away for 10 minutes, and I can give some commentary, and then we can wait for them to return. Everything that I'm seeing right now is Donald Trump is definitely guilty of trying to steal the whole United States, not just an election. He's a grifter, and how people don't understand that, I don't know. Why don't people get it? He had help. Had not been for, and Pence is not a great guy at all, but had it not been for Pence and maybe a couple of other ones of the rats that jumped ship because they really didn't know how far he would go, yeah, this would have been a different outcome. This would have been a very different outcome. When you talk about having text messages from the Secret Service that have been hidden, that nobody, all of a sudden, nobody can find the text messages between the Secret Service and what was going on that day on January 6th and the days prior and after. When you talk about Donald Trump trying to go to the Capitol because he wanted to be there, he wanted to storm the Capitol. Do you understand what was going on? Donald Trump wanted to storm the Capitol. of the United States because he was a little boy who didn't get what he wanted. He didn't get his ass whooped as a child. So I blame his mama. Okay, yeah, pull her ass up out of wherever the hell she's at and whoop her ass because what she unleashed. And when you get to Cassie Hutchinson, going back over her, it was great that she came and told what she saw, what she heard. But she's no angel either because she went to work for these people. There was no secret of what Donald Trump was when he came down those escalator stairs. There was no secret to what he was and what he was about. Those people that went to work for him, they knew. They knew exactly what he was, and they were okay with it. So none of these people that are testifying are good people. I don't give any of them a pass because you were with that administration from day one. Day one, you were there. You were involved in all the things that fucked over regular Americans, and you helped your friends, your oil and gas and these corporations when you gave the 1% their tax cuts and didn't want to do anything for people that are living from day to day. I have no sympathy if you're getting calls and getting threatened because you knew when you took that job with that administration what it was about. I don't feel no type of way for you. I don't care. I really don't. And I'm just reporting on what I see is bullshit. And that's what this is. This is a bunch of bullshit. You know it, I know it. And people that are still trying to say that Donald Trump is here to save us. Who's here to save who? What has he saved you from? What has he done for the average person except for sending them a check as a payment to shut the fuck up? And a lot of y'all willing to shut the fuck up. That's amazing to me. You were willing to let this orange monster back. I had a friend of mine say, you sending them checks. That made me look at them so totally different. That means your ass can be bought and sold. That's what you just told me. That you can be bought and sold. And to the oppressor. Are you fucking kidding me? I was the wrong one for you to say that to because I do look at you. I kind of look at you slightly different, my guy. Because anytime you can tell me a $1,400 check would do it for you, yeah, okay, I'm good. I'm good. Nothing more to see here. Nothing. Let's go back.
There are no witnesses testifying in person today, but every member of the committee is expected to offer evidence. Still to come, presentations from Representatives Pete Aguilar and Jamie Raskin. And also, if you missed anything from today, we'll be showing it again in its entirety tonight at 8 Eastern here on C-SPAN.
I'm doing it now so you don't have to do it later. So we can get some commentary and kind of understand what's going on because a lot of people are not paying attention to what's going on. And I think that's really sad. It's really sad that we don't pay attention to what's going on in the government because it does affect us. I really didn't pay attention until Trump got into office. Well, not real well. Yeah, I kind of paid attention, but not as much as from 2015 on. Uh, I'm no fan of Obama. I'm no fan of any Democrat or Republican. Actually, that's how come it was so easy for me to go independent. I don't believe in what either one of them say. I don't trust either party. Uh, Progressives are great, okay, but how many progressives are really getting into office? How many people are really going to go on and vote for progressives? So I'm just like I'm going to vote for the people that come as close to what I need to see a difference in my life. And a Republican is definitely no. I can't. Not no. Not with a clear conscience, because they have shown who they are. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Mitch McConnell, and don't let me get started on Lady what is her name? Lady Lindsay. Don't let me get started on her ass. Okay. She really needs to go somewhere and sit the hell down. Okay, she wants to talk about what women should do with their bodies. Has she ever even seen a vagina? That's my question. That's what we should be talking about. If you've never been in one or had one, you should not be talking about what a woman that has one should be doing with her vagina. I don't care if you think you're a woman. You should not be talking about what women were born with and what they should be doing with them. Period. So all this is nonsense. It's all nonsense, and nobody's paying attention to what's going on. They throwing so much at you that you don't know, and you're not paying attention because you got so much going on. You got food prices going up, you got gas prices going up, and now you got Putin punk ass over here throwing bombs at people. Because he's another white boy that couldn't get what the fuck he wanted. His mama didn't give him no hug or coochie. I don't know what the hell is going on with him. Okay, don't care. Being honest. And all this money. I can understand you want to help Ukraine, and I thought it didn't matter. But you got people right here in the hood that has been needing help for years, and we have a problem delivering on that. Have a problem delivering on that. But you want to help everybody else in their country. Okay, you want to seem strong. You don't give a damn. The United States government doesn't give a damn about their own people. It's all a game, and everything that the United States has, they destroy. Their part, they go and do coups on other people, other countries. This government is not innocent. And once you stop saying this innocent, this is a great country, you'll be much, once you open your eyes and
Again, this
see.
is C-SPAN's live coverage of the January 6th committee and its ongoing investigation into the attack on the U.S. Capitol. A brief break right now. We do expect things to resume in about 4 minutes or so. Currently, the committee has no further hearings scheduled, but it's possible that there could be more to follow after today. The committee is expected also to produce a final report before the end of the year. And we want to let you know that these proceedings from the January 6th committee and all C-SPAN programs are brought to you as a public service by the cable industry and these television providers, including Dish Network, Vive, Mediacom, and Buckeye Broadband. And a quick reminder, if you're watching on TV, but you have to step away, you can continue to follow everything on the go with C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app. It is available to download on the Apple Store and Google Play.
What I did is what I did was I subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel C-SPAN, and that's where I get my information. I'm broke. I don't have the money to go and subscribe to these paid plans. So I'm trying to get you guys the news as best I can, so we can decipher and understand what is really going on in the United States. And I'm gonna tell you, it's easier to steal from people when you commit the crime right in front of their faces, and that's what's going on. We're being robbed right in front of our faces. That way, you can't say that you did not know. Every time you go and vote for one of these people that are, for a fact, is robbing us blind, that is your fault. That is your fault because you know. So I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's hard looking at what's going on, and people act like they don't know. And just go on with life. And we're being robbed. We are being robbed. Unbelievable. Okay, I had to test my speaker because I couldn't see if I couldn't hear for a minute. But yeah, that's the problem. Nobody is paying attention because I spoke with some young ladies the other day. They had no idea what was going on, and that's a problem. When the average person has tuned out to what's going on in the government, when you tune out, that's when they can get away with the most damage. So we only have a couple more minutes. They'll be back in session. They went on a brief recess, and we're going to get back to this in a couple of minutes. So I'll wait for them to file back in. But until that time, I just want everybody to know that you still have the option to go in and vote. I voted already. I'm in Pennsylvania, and I went on and filled that form out and sent it back in. Um, I felt okay doing it because at least I know I did the little part that I could do. Um, I'm hoping that everything turns out well for us because the 2022 and 2024 we have a big problem. There are more people that are denying. They are denying the loss. You have people that, I mean, these people that you letting these jackasses. You're voting for jackasses and people that need to be on medication. You know, just because. But oh my God, it's just unbelievable the state of the state of our government is now. We have fools running the government, and people are just they screwed us over so badly until now we can't pay attention. They already knew the American public's attention span is really low, because I don't feel like that after Trump was telling people you can grab them by the pussy and you can do whatever you want to him because you got money. I didn't think he was the right person for the job anyway. I didn't see him as no great savior. Well, he wasn't going to be my savior anyway. He was going to save other people, and I haven't seen him save them yet. So you got this one white woman. She's all on TikTok crying, President Trump, please come and save us, you dumb bitch. That's what I saw. I feel no type of way for those people that vote for people like that. I feel no type of way. You get what's coming to you. And if the people of Georgia let people like Herschel Walker in, you get what you deserve. Whatever the fuck happens to you, you really do. You deserve it. I don't even care. People in Florida, you deserve what is happening to you. You keep voting in these people that don't care. This dude over here flipping some goddamn man photo ops. Don't you understand what a photo op is? Are you that stupid? Jesus fucking Christ. Jesus Christ. No wonder they can do whatever they want to do to you because y'all dumb as dirt. I've actually given enough commentary. After this is over with, I'm just going to close down the show and pray for everybody because right now I see people really don't give a damn about what's going on in this government. They really don't give a damn. You want to sit back and you complain, but you're not willing to go out there and let people know what's going on so you can see that this government doesn't care about you. Period. They don't care. What is it? Biden talking about he letting thousands of people out because of marijuana. There's nobody in federal prison because of marijuana charges. Shut the fuck up. Gaslighting the shit out of y'all. And y'all just go with it. Just all over the news. Biden letting this weed. Man, look, there's nobody in jail in federal prison for a marijuana charge. If they're in there, they did much more than that, and they're on their way back. So let's get with it. And I'm done talking to y'all until after the show is over. And if you want to tune in, tune out, it's up to you. I mean, because right now I'm looking at us losing our country and nobody gives a damn. But I'm going to report on it anyway.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the morning of January 6th, President Trump knew that the crowd was angry. He knew that they were armed and dangerous, and he knew that they were going to the Capitol. It's important to understand the lengths the president was willing to go to physically be at the Capitol because it was part of his strategy to disrupt Congress and to stay in power.
They should have let him win.
As the time for the Ellipse rally approached, an email was circulated among intelligence officials, including Secret Service intelligence official, attaching communications among rallygoers that specifically contemplated violence. Trump has given us marching orders. One post on the Donald.Win wrote, basically, if you're east of the Mississippi, you can and should be there.
Unbelievable.
Advance on the Capitol. Keep your guns hidden. Don't fuck around. Full kits. Wow. 180 rounds minimum for main rifle, another 50 for sidearm per person. What is clear from this record is that the White House had more than enough warning to warrant stopping any plan for an Ellipse rally, and certainly for stopping any march to the Capitol. And as evidence from our prior hearings has suggested, the president was aware of this information. But despite awareness of the potential for violence and weapons among the crowd, the Ellipse event nevertheless went forward, and Donald Trump instructed the angry crowd, some of whom were armed, to march to the Capitol. As my colleague Mr. Schiff just described, the Secret Service reported that thousands in the crowd near the Washington Monument would not enter the rally area because magnetometers used in screening attendees would detect any prohibited items they carried. Mr. Trump knew this. His Secret Service had told him about it that morning. Even in spite of these warnings, Cassidy Hutchinson overheard the president say this shortly before he took stage.
He wanted it full, and he was angry that we weren't letting people through the mags with weapons, what the Secret Service deems as weapons and our weapons. I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
And when he went on stage, President Trump himself asked law enforcement to let his supporters in the rally site.
And I'd love to have, if those tens of thousands of people would be allowed, the military, the Secret Service, and we want to thank you, and the police, law enforcement, great, you're doing a great job. But I'd love it if they could be allowed to come up here with us. Is that possible? Can you just let them come up, please?
President Trump then told his supporters to march to the Capitol. Let's pause at this point to consider President Trump's state of mind, his motivation at this moment. By that point, it was known to Secret Service that members of the crowd were armed. President Trump had been told, and there was no doubt that President Trump knew what he was going to do, sending an angry mob, a number of whom were clad in tactical gear and military garb, armed with various weapons, to the Capitol. There's no scenario where that action is benign. And there's no scenario where an American president should have engaged in that conduct. It did not matter whether President Trump believed the election had been stolen or not. This could not be justified on any basis for any reason. You may also recall testimony from our summer hearings regarding Mr. Trump's efforts to lead the mob to the Capitol himself in his angry altercation in the presidential SUV when the Secret Service told him it was far too dangerous for him to go. As we detailed in testimony from the Metropolitan Police and White House personnel during our July 21st hearing, information about the altercation was widely known. So widely known that one former White House employee with national security responsibilities explained that this information was in fact water cooler talk in the White House complex. As that professional told us, they remember hearing in the days after January 6th how angry the president was when he was in a limo that afternoon. That professional also testified that they were specifically informed of the president's irate behavior in the SUV by Mr. Ornato in Mr. Ornato's office. It was Mr. Engel with Mr. Ornato in that office. They'd expressed to me that the president was irate, on the drive up. Mr. Engel did not deny the fact that the president was irate. That, of course, corresponds closely with the testimony you saw this summer from Cassidy Hutchinson, a Metropolitan Police officer who was in the motorcade, and from multiple sources. Additionally, after concluding its review of the voluminous additional Secret Service communications from January 5th and January 6th, the committee will be recalling witnesses and conducting further investigative depositions based on that material. Following that activity, we will provide even greater detail in our final report. And I will also note this. The committee is reviewing testimony regarding potential obstruction on this issue, including testimony about advice given not to tell the committee about this specific topic. We will address this matter in our report. We also want to remind you now of how security professionals working in the White House complex and who reported to national security officials responded when they learned that Mr. Trump intended to lead the mob to the Capitol.
To be completely honest, we were all in a state of shock.
Because what?
Because it just, one, I think the actual physical feasibility of doing it, and then also we all knew what that implicated and what that meant, that this was no longer a rally, that this was going to move to something else if he physically walked to the Capitol. I don't know if you want to use the word insurrection, coup, whatever. We all knew that this would move from a normal, democratic, public event into something else. Why were we alarmed?
Right.
The president wanted to lead tens of thousands of people to the Capitol. I think that was enough grounds for us to be alarmed.
President Trump was still considering traveling to the Capitol even after returning to the White House. He knew well before 2 p.m. that a violent riot was underway at the Capitol. He was aware of the ongoing lawlessness, but his motorcade was held on West Executive Avenue outside the White House because he still wanted to join the crowd. Here's Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, describing an exchange she had with the president as soon as he arrived back at the White House.
So to the best of my recollection, I recall him being, saying that he wanted to physically walk and be a part of the march, and then saying that he would ride the beast if he needed to, ride in the presidential limo.
From the Secret Service, the Select Committee has also obtained important new evidence on this issue. It shows how frantic this hour must have been for the Secret Service, scrambling to get the President of the United States to back down from a dangerous and reckless decision that put people in harm's way. Take a look at the Secret Service email from 1:19 p.m. on January 6th, the minute that President Trump got out of the presidential vehicle back at the White House. As soon as the president left his motorcade, leadership from the Secret Service contacted Bobby Engel, the lead agent for the presidential detail, and warned him that they were, quote, concerned about an OTR, an off-the-record movement to the Capitol. The people sworn to protect the safety of the President of the United States and who routinely put themselves in harm's way were convinced that this was a bad idea. Secret Service documents also reveal how agents were poised to take President Trump to the Capitol later that afternoon. Agents were instructed to don their protective gear and prepare for a movement. A few minutes later, they were told the president would leave for the Capitol in 2 hours. It wasn't until 1:55 p.m. that the president's lead Secret Service agent told them to stand down. We are not doing an OTR to the Capitol. By then, rioters had breached the Capitol and were violently attacking the efforts of the brave men and women in law enforcement trying to resist the mob. President Trump may not have gone to the Capitol on January 6th, but what he did from the White House cannot be justified. While congressional leaders, both Democrats and Republicans, worked with Vice President Pence to try and address the violence, President Trump refused urgent pleas for help from nearly everyone around him. And what he did do only made the situation worse. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, for the opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The president was still exhorting his supporters at the Ellipse to go fight like hell at 12:50, around the time that the first wave of rioters first breached barricades defending the Capitol. Secret Service documents we recently received give a timeline of precisely what the White House knew and when. At 1:19, the president's emergency...
I only have one question. If that had been thousands of black, brown, and yellow people running up in the Pentagon or whatever the hell, the Capitol, would that outcome had been the same? Would the police have stood down like they did with these mutts that were running up in there with guns? Would they have stood down then? I mean, really? That's a question I have.
From that point until approximately 4 p.m., over the next 2 hours and 40 minutes, the president stayed in the White House dining room, attached to the Oval Office, and watched this unprecedented assault take place at the Capitol. We have testimony from several members of the president's White House staff establishing that President Trump refused entreaties from his closest advisors and family members to tell his supporters to stand down and leave the Capitol. Here's the testimony of President Trump's White House counsel, Pat Cipollone.
I can't talk about conversations with the president, but I can generically say...
You notice how the oppressor gets so shaken when they can't get what they want, and all of their other oppressor friends are not going along with the game? This is just unbelievable to me, you know? And people still think that Democratic voting is going to help us. You really believe? Y'all really still believe in this system? It's no.
Or getting into the Capitol or approaching the Capitol in a way that was violent.
You on the staff did not want people to leave the Capitol.
On the staff?
In the White House.
I can't think of anybody, you know, on that day who didn't want people to get out of the Capitol, particularly once the violence started.
This guy held so much information for so long. They had to make him come in there and tell what was going on. I mean, for real? You're not a good guy, bro. You're still not a good guy. You're just a rat who jumped off the ship. Because if he had made it, you just stayed right there with him.
So I answered.
No, I said in the White House.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought you said who else on the staff.
He won't say Trump. He won't say it. Say it.
Yeah, I can't reveal communications.
You're a bitch.
But obviously, I think, you know. Yeah.
No.
Mr. Cipollone's testimony is corroborated by multiple other White House staff members, including Cassidy Hutchinson.
She the one told on him he wasn't going to tell. Shut up.
Heard from Mark Meadows.
I like Jamie Raskin, though.
He had said something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He doesn't want to do anything more. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong.
A former White House employee with national security duties similarly recalled an exchange between Mr. Cipollone and Eric Hirschman about President Trump's inaction against the mob assault underway at the Capitol. Mr. Hirschman said something to Mr. Cipollone. He seemed to relay that, the president didn't want anything done. Throughout this period, some of the president's most important political allies, family members, and senior staff all begged him to tell his supporters to disperse and go home. They included Sean Hannity,
deserve whatever happened.
Laura Ingraham, and other
you
allies
really do.
of Fox News.
You already deserved it, but you doubling down on your bullshit. Yeah.
Others in Congress and officials in the cabinet and executive branch, all of them made appeals to Donald Trump, which he rejected and he ignored. The Select Committee interviewed several people who were in the dining room with Donald Trump that afternoon, and every single one of these witnesses told us that he was watching the violent battles.
He was watching on TV like a 2-year-old.
He did not call his Secretary of Defense or the National Guard, the Chief of the Capitol Police,
Oh, I
or
hate
the Chief
him.
of the Metropolitan Police Department.
And to your knowledge, was the president in that private dining room the whole time that the attack on the Capitol was going on? Or did he ever
The only
go,
reason why she's snitching is because they
again, with your
made her.
knowledge, to the Oval
She's
Office,
part of the problem
to
too.
the White House Situation Room, anywhere else?
That's my recollection. He was always in the dining room.
Yeah, what did they say, Mr. Meadows or the president, at all during that brief encounter that you were in the dining room? What do you recall?
I think they were already watching the TV.
Do you know whether he was watching TV in the dining room when you talked to him on January 6th?
It's my understanding he was watching television.
2 hours in,
When you were in the dining
and
room,
from the start, we already knew that this guy is a criminal. We know that he's a grifter. We already know these things. What is taking so goddamn long to get his ass and put him in jail?
The president
And him
watched
and
the
all his
bloody
friends.
attack
What's taking so
unfold
fucking
on
long?
Fox
Come on,
News
man.
from his dining
We
room.
already know what's
Members of
going on.
Congress and other government
This is
officials
crazy.
stepped into the gigantic leadership void created by the president's chilling and studied passivity that day. What you're about to see is previously unseen footage of congressional leaders, both Republicans and Democrats, as they were taken to a secure location during the riot. You'll see how everyone involved was working actively to stop the violence, to get federal law enforcement deployed to
It's
the
a damn
scene
shame they
to
life
put
had to be
down
in
the
danger
violence and secure
for them to work
the Capitol
together.
complex.
But then
Not
when they
just
come out,
Democrats
you got the
like
goddamn
Speaker Nancy
Republicans over
Pelosi
there
and
acting
House
like
Majority
this
Leader
shit
Steny
jump
Hoyer,
off.
but
You
Republicans
motherfuckers
like
make me
Vice President
sick.
Pence, Senate Majority Leader Mitch
Ugh.
McConnell, Majority Whip John Thune, and countless other appointees across the administration. All of them did what President Trump was not doing, what he simply refused to do. Take a listen.
We're starting to get surrounded. They're taking the north front.
Telling you, if this hadn't been a bunch of black folks really running up in that bitch, this wouldn't have even ended this way. You know what, man? Fuck y'all, for real. On my mama, fuck y'all. Yeah, and I just pulled the race card because you know it's fucking true. Had this been a bunch of black folks or brown folks or tan color, anybody with any kind of melanin, y'all, they would have dropped bombs all on top of their head. But no, because of some white folks is disgruntled because they think they about to be replaced, which don't nobody give a fuck about you enough to try to replace you. Being honest, dead ass. Nobody gives a damn about you enough to try to replace you, bitch.
We can elect the president of the United
Stupid
States.
ass. You just scared
Did we
that
go
you're gonna get
back
the
into
same
session?
treatment that you gave out.
We
Well,
did go back into session, but now apparently everybody on the floor is putting on tear gas masks to prepare for a breach. Well, I'm trying to get more information.
They're putting on their
Tear gas masks.
this scary bitch is. She ain't shit either.
We need an area for the House members. They're all walking over now through the tunnels.
They want that ass. They want your ass, Nancy.
I'm going to call up the effing Secretary of DOD.
This shit is absolutely
We have
crazy.
some senators who are still in their hideaways. They need massive personnel now. Can you get the Maryland National Guard to
Absolutely
come
nuts.
too?
This is
I
crazy.
have something to say, Mr. Secretary. Well, I'm going to call the mayor of Washington, D.C. right now and see what other outreach he has to other police departments, as Leader Hoyer has mentioned.
Absolute bunch of animals. What you call black folk, man, he's nothing but a bunch of fucking terrorists. That's all the hell they are.
Hi,
Period.
Governor. This is Nancy.
Period.
Governor, I don't know if you have been approached about the Virginia National Guard. Mr. Hoyer was speaking to Governor Hogan, but I still think you probably need the okay of the federal government in order to come into another jurisdiction. Thank you. Oh my
Look at this
God.
bullshit.
They're just breaking windows. They're doing all kinds of, it's really that they said somebody was shot. It's just
And she got
horrendous,
shot because she
and
tried to
all
run
at
up.
the instigation of the President of the United
I
States.
feels no type of way. I
Okay,
feels
thank
no
you,
type of
Governor.
way
I
about her
appreciate
ass.
what you're doing, and if you don't mind, I'd like to stay in touch.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
Jazz. I'm sorry, Jazz. My daughter probably have to tell me some, man, mama, come on.
I'm just talking to Governor
No,
Northam.
fuck the bitch.
And what he said is they sent 200 state police and a unit of the National Guard. They're breaking windows and going in, obviously ransacking our offices and all the rest of that. That's nothing. The concern we have about personal harm, personal safety it just transcends everything. But the fact is, on any given day, they're breaking the law in many different ways. And quite frankly, much of it at the instigation of the President of the United States. And now, if he could at least somebody.
Yeah, why don't you get the president to tell them to leave the Capitol, Mr. Attorney General, and your law enforcement?
That lady got killed on her own. She walked her ass up there. And, come on, man. Don't jump on my shit with that bullshit. Don't come over here with that shit. Okay, she jumped her ass up there and they told her to leave. She wanted to act like she was Billy Badass, and now she's in the fucking grave. Okay, I feels no type of way. So
You have, you
go ahead
also
on now.
have troops, this is Steny Hoyer, troops,
Okay, so we have a little
Fort
bit of time
Mcnair,
to make that decision.
Andrews Air Force Base,
All right,
other military bases.
thank you.
We
Thanks,
need
Paul. Bye.
active duty National Guard.
How soon in the future can you have the place evacuated, cleaned out?
I'ma just laugh at you. Evidently, you one of those ones that Trump them. So what I'm gonna do is just leave you where you at right now, because I can't do it. The whole system is fucked up. Okay, but I'm gonna let this sit there.
We're trying to figure out how we can get this job done.
We don't know where that shit
Talked to
came
Mitch
from, man.
About
Listen.
it earlier. He's not in the room right now, but he was with us earlier and said, we want to expedite this, and hopefully they could confine it to just one complaint, Arizona, and then we could vote, and that would be, then just move forward with the rest of the state. The overriding wish is to do it at the Capitol. What we are being told very directly is it's going to take days.
They killed the lady and nobody's questioned it. Okay,
bad
men
report about the
died.
condition
If they hadn't
of-
ran up
of
in
the,
there,
um,
her ass wouldn't have been
House
killed.
floor with
Come on, man.
defecation and
Shut
all
the
that
fuck up talking
type
to me.
of
Don't
thing
come over here with that
as
dumb
well.
shit.
I don't think that's
Today is
hard
not
to clean up,
today.
but I
Today
do
is not the
think it
day
is,
to come over here
more
while I'm
from a
reading
security
and listening to this
standpoint of making
bullshit
sure that
and
everybody
trying to
is
give
out of
these
the
people a
building,
pass.
and how long will that
She
take?
would not have been killed if
I
she hadn't
just got
ran
off
her
with
ass
Vice
up in there with the rest of the goons. These militant little soldier boys. Okay,
But
so
he
stop.
left the
Don't come over here
conversation with-
because
he
you're
said
getting none from over
he had the
here.
impression from Mitch.
My daughter
Mitch
is
wanted
dead over some
everybody back
bullshit. Man,
to
she
do it
man,
there.
suck a dick
I
for
said,
real.
well,
Eat
we're
an
getting
ass.
a counterpoint that is, we could take time to clean up the poo-poo that they're making all over the, literally and figuratively in the Capitol, and that it may take days to get back.
I'm at the Capitol building. I'm literally standing with the chief of police of the U.S. Capitol Police. He just informed me what you will hear through official channels. Paul Irving, your
I don't know why her old ass is still in office. None of these people, I don't know why any of them are still there. So you have to retire at a certain age, and this bitch still running her and the other one. All these old motherfuckers, and it's already been reported allegedly that they all taking the Alzheimer's medications. So let's not. You got people running around on Alzheimer's. They can't remember to pull their drawers up, but they making laws. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck
In
out
this
of here.
video, you just saw Senator Chuck Schumer urging Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen to get President Trump to call off the rioters. Of course, Acting AG Rosen did take action to defend the government, as did many other officials, but congressional leadership recognized on a bipartisan basis that President Trump was the only person who could get the mob to end its violent siege of the Congress, leave the Capitol, and go home. Here's Senator McConnell
like the little white woman said, he can grab my
January 6th about how
pussy.
President
Nobody
Trump
wants you, bitch.
abandoned his duties
Nobody.
and failed
That's
to
why
do
you had
his
to ask
job.
him to do it. He wouldn't even think about it. All these people that are supporting Trump and running their ass up in the damn Pentagon or whatever, to the Capitol, he wouldn't waste his dirty little pee on you. Y'all stupid as fuck.
States publicly begged him to
This
do so.
motherfucking turtle right
Loyal
here.
allies frantically called the administration.
This turtle. Oh my God.
The president did not act swiftly. He did not do his job. He didn't take steps so federal law
Mitch
could
McConnell was a
be
menace.
faithfully executed
Fuck him too.
and order restored. No.
In the midst of this violent chaos, Kevin McCarthy implored Donald Trump to tell his supporters in the mob to leave the Capitol. And when that didn't work, McCarthy called Trump's adult children to try to get them to intercede with Trump to call off the insurrectionary violence. In our prior hearings, we showed you a description of what McCarthy told Republican Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler about his conversation with Trump during the violence. Another witness, Mick Mulvaney, President Trump's former chief of staff, has also come forward and corroborated her shocking account.
You know, I asked Kevin McCarthy, who's the Republican leader, about this, and he said he called Donald Trump. He finally got through to Donald Trump, and he said, "You have got to get on TV. You've got to get on Twitter. You've got to call these people off." You know what the president said to him? This is what's happening. He said, "Well, Kevin, these aren't my people. You know, these are Antifa."
Lying.
And Kevin responded and said, "No, they're your people. They literally just came through my office windows, and my staff are running for cover. I mean, they're running for their lives. You need to call them off." And the president's response to Kevin, to me, was chilling. He said, "Well, Kevin, I guess they're just more upset about the election, theft than you are." And that's, you've seen widespread reports of Kevin McCarthy and the president having basically a swearing conversation. That's when the swearing commenced, because the president was basically saying, "Nah, I'm okay with this."
The mob is in control of this
conversation at
January
some
6th
point
BS. Man,
in the
shut the fuck up.
day or week after the riot with Kevin McCarthy. That
This
was very
shit.
similar to what Jamie had.
Really?
The conversation she had
I don't get the
retold
fuck,
about how he
man.
called and asked
Please,
the president to
shut
get him
the
to
fuck
stop.
up.
And the president told him something along the lines of, "Kevin, maybe these people are just more angry about this than you are, maybe more upset." I had the conversation similar to that with Kevin in the day to week after the riot.
And we know how Kevin McCarthy described President Trump's conduct, both in public and in private.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have
I know
immediately
these dudes
denounced the
not,
mob when he
man.
saw what was unfolding.
You was in on it, bro.
These facts require immediate action by President Trump. Accept his share of responsibility, quell the brewing unrest, and ensure President-elect Biden is able to successfully begin his term.
Unbelievable.
But let me be very clear to all of you, and I've been very clear to the president. He bears responsibilities for his words and actions. No ifs, ands, or buts. I asked him personally today, does he hold responsibility for what happened? Does he feel bad about what happened? He told me he does have some responsibility for what happened. And he needs to acknowledge that.
You need to acknowledge it too,
Knowing
my
the
guy.
deadly riot
Stop
was now
sucking
bearing
his dick
down
from the
on his
back,
own
bitch.
Vice President. President Trump composed and sent a tweet attacking
Weak
Vice
ass
President
men,
Pence,
but these are the
accusing
people
him
y'all
of
put in power.
cowardice for not
Weak ass,
unilaterally
weak, but
rejecting
they supposed to be
electoral
the
college votes
stronger
for
race.
Joe
Get
Biden
the fuck out
and
of here,
simply
bunch of
handing
bitches.
Trump the presidency. The impact of that tweet was foreseeable and predictable. It further inflamed the mob, which was chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," and provoked
The only
them
way
to
they
even
know how to
greater
get anything
violence.
is to be violent.
This deliberate
They are
decision
animals.
to further enrage the mob
Those
against
are
Vice
not humans,
President
they are
Pence
animals.
cannot be justified by anything
Okay.
that President Trump might
Those
have
are
thought
not humans.
about the
Those were
election.
the animals
The tweet came
that everybody
precisely at the
complained
time
about
Pence's Secret
right there in
Service
front of your
detail
face.
was
Period.
most
They're
seriously
animals.
concerned
Those were
for
not
the
humans
Vice
that ran
President's
up in
physical
there
safety.
with their little
We've obtained
guns
new
and want to
documents
tell
from the
people what the
Secret
fuck to
Service,
do.
real-time
I
chats
don't even want to
that
hear that shit.
underscore the threat.
So
They
she got
knew
shot. Her
the
ass
Vice
ran up
President
in
would be
there. They told her to
facing
leave.
because
She
of the
wouldn't leave. She
president's
thought she was Billy
escalating
Badass.
incitement of the
So,
mob.
oh, bye. Nobody crying for
After
my
Trump's
daughter.
tweet,
Fuck you.
one agent in the Secret
And that's the
Service's
way I feel about
intelligence
it.
division
I could be wrong
immediately
as hell
warned,
right now.
POTUS just tweeted
My
about
daughter ain't
Pence,
here with me off some bullshit.
probably not
So
going to
fuck
be
you and
good
yours,
for
okay? Because
Pence.
y'all ran up in that motherfucker, thought y'all
Another
was Billy
agent
Badass,
reported the
period.
dramatic impact of Trump's anti-Pence tweet on his followers. POTUS said he lacked courage
No,
over
ain't nobody questioning it. Sure ain't
24,000
questioning it.
likes in under 2 minutes. Employees at
They
Twitter
killed
were
a lady.
nervously
You sound.
monitoring the situation.
Ooh,
They
jeez. I
knew
hope
that
you're not.
certain
And
Twitter
soon
users
as I
were
get the chance,
rioting
I'm
at
gonna
the
see you a friend of
Capitol
my Facebook
and
because I'm getting ready
tweeting
to get
about
rid
it
of your
at the
ass.
same time.
That
As the
dumbass
afternoon
shit.
progressed, the company detected a surge in violent hashtags on the platform, including lines of lethal incitement like execute Mike Pence. Listen to this former Twitter employee,
Mike Pence
Anika
is not no
Navaroli, who first came to the
angel or
committee
savior,
anonymously,
but
but has
damn.
now bravely agreed to be
He ain't
named because
shit
she
either. He
wants
don't
to
need to be
speak
in
out
running for no
about
office
the
either. But
magnitude of the
damn,
threats facing our people.
the rats couldn't stick together.
And you were also seeing content on the platform at that time
They
that
committing all
was
kind of crimes, but claim
directed
black folks
towards
is the
the
ones
vice
that's a
president.
danger.
Hashtag
Come on, man. Eat a dick.
They were
That's what you
literally
can do.
calling for
Eat
his
a dick.
execution.
As this tweet
I'm
was
not on
going
that
out.
kumbaya
Yes.
bullshit.
And after, in
Not right
response
now.
to this
Show the
tweet
fuck
too, because
ain't.
I think as many of Donald
I'm
Trump's
not
tweets
the
did, it
kumbaya
again fanned
sister.
the flames,
I'm not
and it was
that. Nope.
individuals
I'm
who
not
were
it. That
already
ain't it
constructing
for me.
gallows, who were already willing and able and wanting to execute someone and looking for
But that's what the
someone to be
animals
killed.
do. They can't what they
Now
want,
the
so they
individual
kill
has
them.
called upon them to begin
They've been
this
doing it for
coup
what
is
400,
now
500
pointing the
years.
finger
Ever since they
out
crawl
of
out of their
the
cave,
individual
because they're
while they're
animals,
ready to do this.
and they reversed
Here's a
it to make
small
that
sample
they're
of
the ones that are in danger when
reactions
they're
that
the ones
President
that are
Trump's
dangerous.
Fan the Flames tweet provoked
Because they don't
among
care because
Capitol
the little white
rioters
boy
in
was
real
hanging out in his
time.
mama's bathroom or whatever the fuck he couldn't get no
percentage of
coochie
the
in
crowd
real
is
life,
going to the
so he wants to go
Capitol?
shoot up schools. Get the fuck out of here.
100%.
Get the fuck out of here.
It is spread
Yes,
like
I'm triggered
wildfire
like
that
shit
Pence has
right now.
betrayed us, and
Look at
everybody's
this
marching
shit.
on the Capitol, all million of us. It's insane.
Look at this shit. You got me fucked up. You think I want to kumbaya with these motherfuckers? No, I don't. No, I sure don't. I don't know. No. No. You look at this. Listen to the animals. Listen to the animals.
Between 2:30 and
Listen to the
2:35, within
animals.
10 minutes
The
of President
terrorists.
Trump's tweet,
That's a damn
thousands of
shame.
rioters overran the line
That's
the
a damn
Metropolitan
shame.
Police
It really
Force's
is.
Civil
It's bad.
Disturbance
That's
Unit
fucked up.
was holding on the west side of the Capitol. This was the
Little pack
first
of
time in the
dogs.
history of the Metropolitan
Pack of
Police
wild
Department
dogs.
that a security line like that had ever been broken. President Trump's conduct that day was so shameful and
He let
so
his pack of
outrageous that
wild
it
dogs
prompted
out.
numerous members of the White House staff and other Trump appointees to
He
resign.
knew.
In prior hearings, you've heard
He
Deputy
knew.
National Security Advisor Matt Pottinger and Deputy White House Press Secretary Sarah Matthews explain why they felt compelled to resign on that day. Since then, we've spoken to more high-ranking officials, like President Trump's envoy to Northern Ireland and former Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, and Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, who resigned after the 6th
You
in
call her
protest
cha-cha dog
of
food or
Trump's
some shit like
misconduct
that?
and to
He's
dissociate themselves
disrespectful.
from his
Man,
role in the violence.
I don't
Take
even
a listen to
understand
what
how
they
y'all
had to
let this
say.
boy still walking around. People like him and Putin, but y'all go in there and kill everybody else or take them out or what. Or they die from a heart attack or some shit, and then, but this motherfucker still walking around. Shut up.
Now is the time for the president to be presidential. I thought he failed at doing it. I thought he failed at a critical time to be the sort of leader that the nation needed.
I think the events at the Capitol, however they occurred, were shocking.
How did your daughter get you? Bitch, you don't get off my shit. I swear to God. Do not speak on my child. Do not.
And at a particular point, the events were
Block,
such
bitch.
that it was impossible for me to continue, given my personal values and my philosophy. I came as an immigrant to this country. I believe in this country. I believe in a peaceful transfer.
Don't ever think you
of
bold
power.
enough to come speak on my motherfucking daughter, bitch.
And so it was a decision that I made on my own.
Stupid ass bitch. That was a mistake.
When security
Don't
assistants
ever
began
do
to
that.
arrive
Don't
at the Capitol
ever
and the tide
bring up my
turned
daughter in the
against
conversation with me,
insurrection,
ever.
President Trump finally gave his painfully belated instruction at 4:17 p.m. So after multiple hours of rioting and more than 100 serious injuries suffered by our law enforcement officers, the crowd finally began to disperse. Listen
Bunch of
carefully
fucking
to what they
animals,
said
fucking
as
dog
they
face
decided
bitch.
to leave the Capitol.
Look at this shit. Yeah, bitch. I will. Bitch, you know what? Don't play with me. Don't play with me. Don't play with me. Don't play with me. Now when it comes to my kid, don't play with me, ho. Don't play with me, ho. You stupid ass bitch.
He says go home. He says go home.
She wasn't no follower like you, stupid ass bitch.
Finally, at
You get
6:01,
exactly what
President
the fuck.
Trump
And you
tweeted
know what?
again, not to
You gonna
condemn the
them
mass
words,
violence in
that
any
shit you
way,
just
but
prodded
rather
me.
to
You
excuse
gonna feel
and
all of that because
glorify
it's gonna
it.
come right back to you. I ain't
Significantly,
gotta
he made it
touch
clear
you,
that he
bitch.
considered the violence perfectly foreseeable and
Dumbass.
predictable.
By
Check it out.
January, by people
These are
January
the
6th.
things
You
and
stupid
events that
motherfucker.
happen when a sacred landslide election
So I don't fuck
victory
with coon.
is so
Them fucking
unceremoniously,
coon ass.
viciously stripped away from
We
great
don't get the fuck,
patriots
man.
who have been badly, unfairly treated for so long.
I was
These are
trying
the
to come on
things
and
that
be
happen, he
professional.
said, giving the
But
whole
then you
game
got
away.
bitches like that
Trump
come
was
and jump
telling
on
us
my
that the
shit.
vice president, the Congress, and all the injured and wounded cops, some of whom are with us today,
Stupid
got
asshole.
what was coming to us. According to Trump, January 6th should not be a day that lives in shame and infamy in our history, but rather in glory. Remember this day forever, he wrote proudly, as if he were talking about D-Day or the Battle of Yorktown. Trump did nothing to stop the deadly violence for obvious reasons. He thought it was all justified, he incited it, and he supported it.
Would it have been possible at any moment for the president to walk down to the podium in the briefing room and talk to the nation at any time between when you first gave him the advice at 2 o'clock and 4:17 when the video statement? Would that have been possible?
Would it have been possible?
Yes.
Yes, would have been possible.
The president had wanted
Oh.
to make a statement and address the American people.
Y'all keyboard
He could have
warriors
been
be
on
killing me,
camera
boy.
almost instantly.
That bitch would have
And
never said no shit
conversely,
like that
the
up
White
in my
House
face,
press
boy.
corps has offices
And yes,
that
I
are
blocked that
located
ass.
directly
Because
behind
you know what?
the
Because
briefing
just
room.
right now,
And so if he had wanted to
not
make
the
an
time to
address
play with
from
me,
the Oval
bitch.
Office, we could have assembled the White House press corps probably in a matter of minutes
Fuck
to get
you
them
and yours.
into the Oval for him to do an on-camera address.
Mr. Chairman, nothing in law or fact could justify the president's failure to act.
And I assume you also would agree the president has a particular obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
That is one of the president's obligations, correct?
Mr. Chairman, in numerous places, our Constitution strongly opposes insurrection and rebellion. Article 1 gives Congress the power to call forth the militia to
shouldn't have had their ass
suppress
over there, fucking
insurrections.
around in another
Section
country.
3 of the 14th Amendment
Always minding somebody else's
disqualified
goddamn
from
business.
holding federal and state office anyone who has sworn an oath to defend the Constitution but betrays it by engaging in insurrection or rebellion. It was President Lincoln at the start of the Civil War in 1861 who best explained why democracy rejects insurrection. Insurrection, he said, is a war upon the first principle of popular government, the rights of the people. American democracy belongs to all the American people, not to a single man. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. During this committee's first hearing in July of last year, our witnesses were 4 police officers who helped repel the riots of January 6th.
People lost their
We
lives, and
asked
this bitch
them
gonna talk
what
about
they
something.
hoped to
They
see
killed
the
somebody. These
committee
people lost their
accomplish
lives up in them
over the
motherfuckers.
course of our
And you
investigation.
still trying to get this dude a pass.
Officer
You
Gunnell
stupid ass
wanted
bitch.
to know why the rioters were made to believe that the election process was rigged.
They hadn't took their ass
Officer
up there, she'd
Fanone
still be alive.
asked
Shut
us to
up.
look into the actions and activities that resulted in the day's events. Officer Hodges was concerned about whether anyone in power had a role. Officer Dunn put it simply, get to the bottom of what happened. We've worked for more than a year to get those answers. We've conducted more than 1,000 interviews and depositions. We received and reviewed hundreds of thousands of pages of documents. Thanks to the tireless work of our members and investigators, we have left no doubt, none, that Donald Trump led an effort to upend American democracy that directly resulted in the violence of January 6th. He tried to take away the voice of the American people in choosing their president and replace the will of the voters with his will to remain in power. He is the one person at the center of the story of what happened on January 6th. So we want to hear from him. The committee needs to do everything in
bitch, you
our
ain't gonna
power
do that though, bro.
to tell the
You ain't
most
gonna do that,
complete
bruh.
story
Sorry.
possible and provide recommendations to help ensure nothing like January 6th ever happens again. We need to be fair and thorough and gain a full context for the evidence we've obtained. But the need for this committee to hear from Donald Trump goes beyond our fact-finding. This
He's
is a
gonna
question
plead the
about
fifth, my guy,
accountability to the
because he a
American people.
bitch.
He must be accountable. He is required to answer for his actions. He's required to answer to those police officers who put their lives and bodies on the line to defend our democracy. He's required to answer to those millions of Americans whose votes he wanted to throw out as part of his scheme
I wonder
to
if somebody
remain in
ran up in
power.
Mama,
And whatever is
would
underway
the outcome
to
be the
ensure
same? Somebody,
this
people need to
accountability
start running
under
up in
law,
that bitch.
this committee will demand a
Since
full
since we
accounting
running up and stuff,
every American person of the events of January 6th. So it is our obligation to seek Donald Trump's testimony. There's precedent in American history for Congress to compel the testimony of a president. There's also precedent for presidents to provide testimony and documentary evidence to congressional investigators. We also recognize that a subpoena to a former president is a serious and extraordinary action. That's why we want to take this step in full view of the American people.
Okay.
Especially because the subject matter at issue is so important to the American
He's not gonna bring his
people,
orange ass out in
and the
public and
stakes
tell
are
people what he
so high
did.
for our
And they're gonna
future and our democracy.
they're gonna keep on giving his ass
And
a pass,
so,
bro.
I recognize the Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, to offer a motion.
Let's
Mr.
go.
Chairman, pursuant to today's notice, I send to the desk a committee resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
Committee Resolution 1, resolved that the chairman be and is hereby directed to subpoena Donald J. Trump for documents and testimony in connection with the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol pursuant to Section 5C4 of House Resolution 503.
Let's go.
And Clause
He ain't
2M
coming though.
of Rule 11 of the Rules of the House of Representatives.
The gentlewoman from Wyoming is recognized on her resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, our committee now has sufficient information to answer many of the critical questions posed by Congress at the outset. We have sufficient information to consider.
Let's not get it twisted. Liz Cheney is not a good person either, but she did stand up. I'll give her that. But she even if she ran, she wouldn't get a vote from me ever.
Another January 6th. But a key task remains. We must seek the testimony under oath of January 6th central player. More than 30 witnesses in our investigation have invoked their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And several of those did so specifically in response to questions about their dealings with Donald Trump directly. Here are a few examples. This is Roger Stone with Oath Keepers at the Willard Hotel on the morning of January 6th. And here is Mr. Stone testifying before our committee. Did you speak to President Trump on his private cell phone on either January 5th or January 6th?
Once again, on advice of counsel, I will assert my Fifth Amendment right to respectfully
Look
decline.
at his ugly ass. And I can't women. That's why you pay
This
women
is
to sleep
General
with his
Michael
ugly
Flynn
ass.
walking with Oath Keepers on
Dried up
December
looking
12th,
shit.
2020. And here is General Flynn's testimony before our committee.
Did you, General Flynn, talk to President Trump at any point on January 6, 2021?
The 5th.
Only the mob.
Here is
please
John
the fifth.
Eastman,
Only the mob.
fraudulently
only
instructing
guilty people
tens
plead the
of
fifth,
thousands
right?
of angry
Okay.
protesters that the vice president could change the election outcome on January 6th. Later on this same day, Dr. Eastman acknowledged in writing that Donald Trump knew what he was attempting was illegal. Here is John Eastman testifying before our committee.
Did President Trump authorize you to discuss publicly your January 4th, 2021 conversation with him?
Fifth.
So is it your position that you can discuss in the media direct conversations you had with the President of the United
Fucking
States,
criminal.
but you will not discuss those same conversations
Dog
with
ass.
this committee?
Fifth.
Here is Jeff Clark, who conspired
All
with
these
Donald
dogs.
Trump
Look at
to
him.
corrupt the
Look.
Department of Justice. President Trump wanted to appoint
Looks
Jeff
like a
Clark as
cartoon
acting
character.
Attorney General. And as you can see in this call log we obtained from the National Archives, he did so. And here is Mr. Clark testifying before our committee.
Mr. Clark, when did you first talk directly with President Trump?
Fifth.
Mr. Clark, did you discuss with President Trump allegations of fraud in the 2020 election?
Fifth.
Other witnesses have also gone to enormous lengths
They
to
all
avoid
pleading the fifth
testifying
because they're
about
all
their
guilty
dealings
of
with Donald
committing a
Trump.
crime, man.
Steve Bannon has been tried and convicted by a jury of his peers for contempt of Congress. He is scheduled to be sentenced for this crime later this month. Criminal proceedings regarding Peter Navarro continue. And Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, has refused to testify based upon executive privilege. The committee's litigation with him continues. Mr. Chairman, at some point, the Department of Justice may well unearth the facts that these and other witnesses are currently concealing. But our duty today is to our country and our children and our Constitution. We are obligated to seek answers directly from the man who set this all in motion. And every American is entitled to those answers, so we can act now to protect our republic. So this afternoon, I am offering this resolution that the committee direct the chairman to issue a subpoena for relevant documents and testimony under oath from Donald John Trump in connection with the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol.
That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. If there's no further debate, the question is on agreeing to the resolution. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed is no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Cheney.
Aye.
Ms. Cheney, aye. Ms. Lofgren.
Aye.
Ms. Lofgren, aye. Mr. Schiff.
Aye.
Mr. Schiff, aye. Mr. Aguilar.
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar, aye. Mrs. Murphy.
Aye.
Mrs. Murphy, aye. Mr. Raskin.
Aye.
Mr. Raskin, aye. Mrs. Luria.
Aye.
Mrs. Luria, aye. Mr. Kinzinger.
Kinzinger, aye.
Mr. Kinzinger, aye. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Charlene Taylor, aye. Charlene Taylor,
Clerk
aye,
will report
bitch.
the vote.
Mr. Chairman, on this vote, there are 9 ayes and 0 noes.
The resolution is agreed to. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The chair requests that those in the hearing room remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted members from the room. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
Okay, everybody, looks like that's what we have for today. Really just going back over what they had found to the during the previous 8 hearings. And they've come to a resolution where they want Donald Trump to come and speak under oath. I doubt if he will do that because he's a bitch. Donald Trump says that only people that are guilty plead the fifth. He pled the fifth over 450 times. His kids have pled the fifth. Okay? All of these people have pleaded the fifth because they're they're in trouble and they know that they did what they did. They know it was against the law. Now, if you don't go out and vote and you vote for these people that are denying the race deniers. I mean, come on, people. I mean, whatever the hell you want to call it, but you got people out there losing races and claiming that they didn't lose. Delusional, and it's crazy that the nut house is taking over the United States. Um, I'm going to end the show here, but I will be back with more what the fuck news. We'll be covering shenanigans, political and pop culture. I hope you all guys have a really good day. I'm going to remove them and I am going to wish you all the best. Um, it's over. It's over. I don't know what we're going to do, but we as a nation have to come together. How? I don't know because it's off the rails right now. But thanks for watching. If you catch it on the recap, that's great. If you didn't watch, that's cool too. At this point, I just want to get the news out and let people see what they, see how they feel about it. Have a great day. I mean, have a great day. Bye.
Do you want to be in love with a real one, or you just want to cut?